Hello there, Carl Ginger Egg Detailing, hope you're well. I've got a couple of little jobs on my own bike to do this week, so I'll be making a video on that. I've got a new DID gold chain fit and some stealth sprockets, along with some nice titanium fixtures. Show you how to torque it all up, how to rivet it and what have you. So enjoy this video, here we go. So you're going to need a few tools for this particular bike. 14mm socket and a torque wrench. I'm using a breaker bar with a 40mm socket again, a ratchet, 40mm socket and extension, dead blow hammer, might need to give it a little tap afterwards, some Ceratec anti-seize compound, we need the fixing nuts, and we've got some cleaner and a microfiber. So all we're going to do first is crack these nuts off. So last of the nuts coming off, and luckily it just fell off so smoothly. Now's a good time to give all the hub etc a good clean. It's a bit of a pain to get in there, clean it any other times. It's a little bit of brake cleaner, just get in there, clean all the muck out, any grease and whatever. Also a really good time to check the bearings of the wheels as well. At this point I'm just going to add a little bit of Ceratec grease to the mating surfaces, just so the aluminium and the steel don't corrode together. Should be a problem on this bike, but been braces for me. So I'm just going to fit the stealth sprocket. These are a really nice finished piece of kit. Always fit well, always last long. It's my go-to sprocket, to be fair. Didn't really need to put one on this bike, but I just fancy some bling on it, to be fair. I'm also going to use some titanium fixings from Race Bolts. These torque up at the same tightness as standard bolts. I think these are about 59 Newton meters, something like that, but if you're doing it on your own bike you need to check your own specs. Really nice finish, you don't get any corrosion or anything on these sort of bolts unless you're sort of leaving your bike to get real minging, and then you might get a bit of corrosion perhaps, but I've never had a problem. So for me personally, this is a really good time to give your wheel a good clean. Once it's back in the bike, it's always a pain in the arse to get behind the sprocket or whatever. Also going to give the brake disc a bit of a brake cleaner and give that a clean up. So run all your nuts down till you feel start to tighten, then you want to be torquing them up. You also need to be checking your book, make sure you don't need thread lock on them. Certain nuts need thread lock, others don't. These are nylock. So time to knock the rivet off the top of the chain link. All you've got to do is just get a little grinder, just grind the top off. This way when you come to use your rivet tool, it will pop the pins out no problem, and it makes your tool last a lot longer as well. For splitting the link I use one of these old school type motocross splitters. I find this is so much easier to use rather than the actual riveting tool which comes from an extraction pin. You just literally open the jaws and wind it in, pops it off no problem, especially if you're going to be using the grinder to knock the top of the riveting off. So we're going to chuck the wheel back in now. With your axle, make sure your spacers installed properly back in the wheels. Also give the axle a little bit of a grease as well. You'll find this will make the installation a lot easier. So with the wheel in, we're just going to fit the caliper back in, put the caliper bolts back in, make sure you use the Loctite if needed, make sure the sliders are all nice and greased with brake grease. So we've got the front sprocket to change, so we just need to remove 4 bolts from the sprocket cover. These are 8mm bolts, and then we'll give it a good clean out, then remove the sprocket. Then we get on to refitting the chain. So as you can see, the nut's got a tab washer on it, so we just need to knock that flat or away from the nut so we can undo it. So the trick is getting the hub nut off is loop the chain around the sprocket, and then a decent sized breaker bar. In this case it's a long ratchet, appropriate size socket, nice and low so you're pulling, and then reach over, put your foot on the brake, or in this case hand, very simple as that. What I tend to do is before I go to unlock it, usually, if they've not got a lock tab on, which means they're high impact, done up, I tend to put a socket on it and just give it a bash with a dead blow hammer. It'll come off easily peasily. Thread the old chain back out. So now the nut's off, we just go ahead and tab washer off, and in this case the sprocket falls off. Sometimes you need to use a puller, but you don't need to this time, so happy days. So we're at the stage, we've got the chain on. I forgot to press record on the last video, but that's life. Basically the way I pull my chain through, I cable tie the end of one chain to the other and then pull it through like that. Fairly simple. So we've made sure the adjusters are loose so we can move the wheel forward. So the chain now comes together nicely, and then it's just a matter of putting the link and riveting it together. Some chains you will need to shorten. This one's pre-cut to length, so it's just a matter of riveting it. But all you do, just get your original chain, lay it over top of the new one, and that's your length. So we've got it all torqued up. It's just a matter of resetting that lock tab. Happy days. Join the chain together. You have a master link, which is the one you rivet, and then you have your O-rings, it being an O-ring chain, so they go like this, and then on the other end of the link. Very important at this stage to make sure you grease, using the greaser provided, grease this and grease the O-rings as well, so they sit down onto grease and are clamped into the grease. That way you get a nice seal. So I'm going to apply some grease to the master link itself. Then I'm going to take the O-rings, make sure they've got grease on them as well. Same again. And then we're going to apply some more grease. And then we're going to prime that hole. There you go. Take some more grease now. Grease them two O-rings up well. I'm just going to put a bit of grease on the front. And apply them O-rings. Good thing about the grease, they will stick quite nicely, so there you go. Take the link. Again, grease the back up. And then it just needs riveting. We're now at the stage where we're going to rivet the chain. What we need to do is get the master link the same width as all the other links. So we just take a measurement off that. That's reading 19.3mm. So, and I should say this will be a bit bigger than that, more 20, yeah. So that's about 20mm, so we need to be 19.3. So with the riveting tool, you get two attachments like this. Very simple, you just... I see a lot of people applying chains, fitting chains, and they use the sprocket. Trouble is with that, you will possibly damage the sprocket, possibly damage the chain. All the chain manufacturers recommend that you do the chain fixing off the sprocket, although it is a little bit easier to do on the sprocket, but this is the way they say to do it, so this is the way I've always done it. Right, so now we're just going to get a spanner and just tighten that gently down. At the same time, keep measuring this gap. That's another thing, if you do it on the sprocket, you can't measure the gap without taking the tool off, so it's a bit of a no-brainer for me. So let's get a spanner and get that tightened down. So there is a handle you can put in here and hold it, but I find it's not very stable, so I put a spanner what fits the body onto the press, and then we'll gently tighten that down. So you ain't got to go mad. I'd advise you use a spanner, you get a bit more feel for it. If you use a ratchet, you tend to get a bit carried away. We'll take a measurement off that now. Yep, still at 20.4, so we've got a little bit of way to go. So we're at the stage now where we've got enough of the master link sticking through to rivet. The width for these are the same as this rivet here. The rollers are still moving, nice and movement in the chain. So we're going to go ahead and rivet these two up. So we've changed out the anvil and put the riveting tool into it. What I'll do another bit on the end of this, show you how the tool and whatever comes to bits and what pieces you need to do what. So now we're just going to rivet the chain. You just find the centre, nip it up, make sure it's square. You're not going mad with a flare on this. Probably about half a turn altogether. We can stop. Just check that now. So that's all riveted up. What you want to be doing afterwards is just making sure your rollers and your link feel nice. Plenty of movement, no tight spots. And that's all there is to it. I'm just going to show you the bits what you need to rivet your chain and remove the chain. As far as removing the chain is concerned, obviously we grind off the top of the rivet. Then I personally use the old style splitter. So much easier, just a matter of opening it out over the link and then you just wind it down, push the pin out, job done. Or you can actually use the press itself with the appropriate size pin in the back like so. Put the other bit in the back and then you can wind the pin out that way. I find with that it's a bit of a faff, change all your bits and bobs. Also, we want your press slides. This is what you do to close the chain down in the first instance. So you're just using it like a clamp basically to close it up to your required thickness. And then the riveting tool itself, usually a rounded end or a dimpled end depending on what style it is. Then you've got an anvil for the back of your rivet. It goes like so. That's all there is to it. So they're the ones you'll mainly use on most motorcycle chains. These others are for cam chains, even push bike chains, and anything like that. It's sort of a universal kit, so you probably won't ever get to use any of that unless you're doing full strip downs of engines and stuff. Well, that's another week gone. Had a lovely couple of days. Been great to get out on the bike and stuff, and today it's absolutely freezing out there, so I've come in for a cup of tea and a warm up, to be fair. The next video is going to be a full detail and some Cerakote work on a BMW ST. I'm going to be Cerakoting the fork tubes, the starter motor, and also the sump. The rear sets as well, they're going to get a coat of silver. So it should be quite an interesting build for you, that one. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe. Catch you all later.